Welcome to Trinity Radio. I'm Braxton Hunter. And I'm muted the whole time. I was muted that whole time. Just completely muted.
Yep.
Sorry about that, guys. But here we are, and it's
unprepared
Trinity Radio
as
time.
usual, right?
Well, we're prepared. We're not prepared technologically. Okay, so let's jump into this. Jonathan, are you a gamer?
No.
Now, for those that don't know, I am a gamer, but also we're going to work through this this initial discussion about gaming, and then we always save time for Q&A that does not have to be related to the topic of the show, and I doubt it will very much. So anyway, let's talk about that. So I am a gamer. I was born in 1980.
I do own 2 video game consoles, though.
Sort of.
No, I actually do own one.
Wait, no, you own 3.
Well, I own
You
2.
own the reboot of the Super Nintendo and the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, right? I mean the Nintendo Entertainment System
and the
NES
yeah.
and the SNES, the Super Nintendo Entertainment
Yes.
System. It is a console technically.
Yes.
Yeah. And then your son owns an Xbox.
No, he had a PlayStation 4. Now he's on the Stadia, and he's wanting the PlayStation 5.
Braxton is a boomer. I am, insofar as these are subjectively chosen titles for objectively verifiable periods of time, I am not a boomer.
Yeah.
At all. Under anyone's definition. Except maybe yours. Okay, so let's... I'm born in 80.
Yeah, I don't care if people call me...
In 1980, we already had, I guess, an Atari 2600.
Yeah.
In fact, I still have that Atari 2600. Played it not too long ago with the old joysticks, the whole bit.
Yeah.
Then, when I was, I guess, 4 or 5 years old, I don't know, Nintendo came out.
Hey, Mr. Phil Fox.
And Nintendo, thank you, Mr. Phil Fox.
Mr. Phil Fox, Drops of Hope Ministries.
All right.
Go subscribe to his channel.
Thank you, Mr.
Open
Phil
up another
Fox.
window and subscribe to it if you're on a desktop. If you're on your phone, minimize our screen. Go to his channel.
So I
hit
own
subscribe.
a video game store, someone says, and Skyrim. I played many hours. Me too. All right. So Nintendo Entertainment System came out. I had loved the arcade game Double Dragon, and the Nintendo had Double Dragon, but they looked like babies on the screen. It was terrible. But I played the heck out of it anyway. And I played that Nintendo until we moved to Nashville. And when I was 11 years old, I got, for my 11th birthday, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System.
Did you watch the Double Dragon movie when it came out?
No.
Oh, it was horrible.
Probably because I wasn't allowed to. I don't know how old I was when it came out.
It was terrible.
But then the Nintendo 64 came out.
Did you watch the Super Mario Brothers movie?
Yes,
with John,
it was terrible. It was. Cameron's done a thing on objective beauty today, and that's objectively not beautiful.
Yes.
So then
liked
you
it.
have I never got the GameCube. I got the Wii. I had a PlayStation 2. That's where I broke my fidelity to the Nintendo, and got the PlayStation 2. It was awesome. PlayStation. Then I got, and it went on up to today. I've got an Xbox One. I've had Xbox for years. So anyway, that's my background in video games. So I'm still a gamer.
Yeah.
You know, my dad told me when I was a kid, he said, when you get older, you're just going to put away childish things and you won't game anymore. Boy, was he wrong.
Yeah. I did Atari, and then I did Nintendo and a little bit of the Super Nintendo, and then it got too complicated for me, so I was like,
Yeah, it got complicated. It's like Microsoft Word. You have to keep up with it every year.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, it's just there's a billion games out there, and it's just like, I don't feel like playing all that. But that was also about the time that I was getting into, and for you gamers out there, if it's an RPG, a real RPG has books and paper and pen and pencil and dice and sometimes miniatures. That's a real, friends sitting around a table, that's a real RPG. And I got into those.
It's a real good way to spread COVID, my friend.
And while you played video games still in your 40s, I did do role-playing games, like real ones with dice and paper and pen. And I did that.
That gives you some credit.
Until my
That gives you
20s.
some credit.
Yeah, I mean, that's to me
Come on with it. Dead air here.
superior to video games.
Well, yes, that's a
in
subjective
every
preference that you have that's
objective
wrong.
measure, it's superior to video
Okay,
games.
well, okay. Let's jump into 5 things that I think Christian apologists or people interested in Christian apologetics can benefit from as it relates to video games. Now, I want to make the regular caveat that all of the things, because I know this is going to come up as a big question, and of course we can talk about it, but the things that we've answered before on the show, like things that relate to mature content in video games, follow your convictions there, insofar as your convictions do not contradict some scriptural mandate for you. But follow your convictions there. That's not really what this show is about. Yes, there are video games you probably shouldn't be playing. There are video games that glorify sexuality as the use of someone for their physical body and no further interest in them. There are video games that glorify gratuitous violence where the point is just to be as violent and disgusting as you can. And I don't know how I feel about that. Now, those kind of things that we need to be aware of. All of that aside, and of course, video game addiction. There are people who are addicted to video games. It is a very real thing that video games are designed for your enjoyment, which means they trigger dopamine responses. You ever looked for something for a really long time in a video game? You finally found that MacGuffin that you were trying to find, and suddenly, boom, dopamine hit, and and this can lead to, of course, an abuse of video games as it destroys your life. So if you're that person, or you sense you could easily become that person, well, then video games are not for you. But for everyone else, I've come up with 5 things. I gave them to Pritchett, and he said, I can't think of any other 5 things. Or anything in addition to these 5
no,
things.
I said we don't need more than 5
Okay,
things.
but if you can, feel free to mention those other things.
Yeah.
All right, so let's jump into it here with the first and most obvious thing that a Christian apologist, and there are people doing this, and I've done this on occasion, that a Christian apologist can do with video games is if he's playing, or she, multiplayer video games online, they can use this as a form, an opportunity to do evangelism and apologetics. Now, of course, there's going to be a lot of people say, well, you Christians are trying to suck the fun out of everything. You're going to go into the gaming world and spread the love of Jesus. Yes, spreading the love of Jesus. And if I didn't know Jesus
How awful
and
that
Jesus'
is.
love was spread to me, I would be thrilled to discover that the only people that are not thrilled with the love of Jesus are people that reject Jesus.
Yeah.
And many of the people you'll encounter online are not necessarily that kind of person. And that there's another good thing about the kind of person you're going to interact with online is that our average viewer on this channel is between 18 and 35 years old and is male. Now, that's not everybody, and we love the ladies that are here, and we love the people that are older than that, and the people that are younger than that. I'm not sure you're supposed to have an account, but whatever, we love you too. Okay, but there are going to be people who are going to say, well, you're trying to suck the joy out of this. And what was the other point I was going to get to? There was something else.
I don't know, but Jesus brings joy
completely
to
lost it.
things. Jesus brings joy to things.
Yes,
We don't-
amen.
Christians sometimes suck the joy
Oh,
out
I know
of
what I was
things,
going to say.
But
yeah,
Jesus
we'll come
doesn't.
back to that. Jesus does not suck the joy out of things. He provides joy.
Even
every
if
good
Christians
thing that
do.
is happening to you that is really good is because of God ultimately.
Right.
And every bad thing is because of
Read it in the book of James.
other than God.
Father lies, for there is no. Shout out
But
Charlie.
what I was going to say is the people you're going to interact with doing online multiplayer gaming are people in that demographic, 18 to 35-year-old males, much of the time, but they're not YouTube atheists who are looking to counter everything that you're saying. You can present them with send them with the message, give them the good reasons to believe if necessary, and it might not be necessary.
And
it can be a more normal human conversation.
To be fair to the YouTube atheist crowd, even if
well, Christian apologists do it too.
yeah, but even if they're in the discussion on the multiplayer game, they're less likely to be, all right, we're going to have our full-scale debate back and forth in the middle of a video game. And hopefully you as the apologist aren't trying to do that as well, right? Just go tit for tat or whatever.
Right, that's not what we should be doing.
Yeah, it should be conversational, not confrontational. And I think that if you're talking to somebody who is either a YouTube atheist or a fan of a YouTube atheist. If they're not being controversial because they're just wanting to play a game and have a conversation, you know, don't be confrontational about it. And hopefully they won't be either.
Well, we'll have to keep this very exciting because Computer Theist is here.
Is he going to be bored again?
He could be.
Yeah.
All right. So
is he a patron?
So I don't know.
Then we don't. No,
no, that's
I'm
not.
kidding.
No, Jonathan. Bad Jonathan.
I'm kidding.
No, Jonathan.
I'm
Okay.
not kidding.
Now, so evangelism, obviously, and it doesn't have to be like that. It can be very natural. You can start talking to someone and talk about life and things like that. I've done that with people before, and so evangelism can come very naturally here.
Yeah,
and
it's
can be
also
very
if you're
effective.
playing with people on a regular basis, the same people that you keep encountering online. It's also helpful to develop an actual relationship before you view them as what non-Christians think of us as, like targets or something. You know,
Well, yeah, treat them like a person. Think of them as a person. And it could be more effective actually for your evangelism.
Yes.
Not that that's why you should be a decent person, but be interested in them. Of course, the strategy I'm going to lay out before this video is done of how you can do this effectively requires you to let them talk most of the time.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
And before you move on to the next, are you about to move on to the next point? I want to point out, aside from the people who are trying to do tabletop role playing on Zoom and whatever, which how do you know they're rolling what they say they roll? And why would you want to take the fun out of it by letting the GM roll the dice for you? That doesn't work.
Why are you going on about
Because tabletop role playing game is an incarnated physical presence with other people in the room.
Yes,
and
you
it's
made this
infinitely
point.
better for evangelism. Once again, because they're right there in the room with you at a social event
Okay.
that's not, you know, in your mom's
Now-
basement or whatever you gamers do.
Okay, now see I don't do this in my mother's basement. That'd be totally weird. I don't even think she has a basement.
Yeah.
But what I did want to say about this is you bring up a good point, even though you didn't mean to, which is that you can, even with video games, of course with tabletop gaming, but even with couch co-op where you're playing alongside someone in your living room, you can do what Gary Habermas says you can do with evangelism and apologetics, which is play the video game, talk about the game, but then like during breaks or whatever, talk about God and talk about, you know, and it may take multiple times, but you can reach someone in a much more focused way.
Yeah.
You have there what's called in the old Randy, what was the old evangelism guy? Randy something.
Alcorn?
No, not Randy Alcorn. But anyway, he
That's the only Randy I know of.
no, he said this is like single event evangelism versus multiple encounter evangelism. Most of what you'll have online, unless you do develop a friendship with someone, is single encounter evangelism. But anyway, interesting stuff to talk about. All right, so learning. So the next thing that I think we've got evangelism. That's obvious. The next thing is learning while gaming. Learning while gaming.
Yeah.
I have multiple friends who I talk to on a somewhat regular basis. I'll tell you one of them because I don't think well, maybe he would care. I better not say it. There are multiple gamers who are apologists, even YouTubers who are apologists and are gamers. And what I've found to be a commonality that I share with them is that sometimes with a single player game, or depending on the multiplayer game, even a multiplayer game, listening to audio content and learning while you're playing the video game. Especially like big open world games where you're just wandering around aimlessly or driving around.
So it has to be kind of a mindless type.
It doesn't
game.
necessarily. For example, you know that me and Chris Date, and we're going to come back to that relationship in a moment, but me and Chris Date and Andy Armstrong play somewhat regularly PUBG, which is a open world battle royale game. And it's multiplayer, but there's so much time wandering around collecting gear that I listen to content all the time while I'm playing PUBG.
Yeah.
So you can do that and learn. You can get through audiobooks. Let me get this out. When I was preparing for the Dan Barker debate, I read his book through once with my eyeballs, and I listened to his book twice and Sam Harris's book once while I played some game, maybe Zelda Breath of the Wild or something. So there is a learning aspect. People say, well, you're just rotting your mind. You're wasting time playing video games. I don't know that goes through necessarily anyway. We'd talk about the goods of video games aside from that. But I don't think you're wasting it if you're learning while you're doing it.
Yeah, and I think that is one aspect that it has over tabletop gaming because you really can't do other things in the background while you're involved in a game, sitting in a room. So yeah, that one is that one's. But one thing that out of the three people, you, Andy, and Chris Date, you can also learn while exercising, which is
Don't change the topic of the show.
Yourselves of at some point, given how much.
This is not about working.
See, video
out.
games should be about learning, but fitness can be about learning as well. And then video games is good for recovery because you don't have to do anything but sit on your couch. And if you're not eating, and if you're not eating a bunch of junk food while you play these video games and listen to your podcast,
and Andy says that the best he's ever done on PUBG is after a workout because it's clarity of thought.
Yeah. So go subscribe to Theology Geek Fitness. I'm trying to get up to 300 subscribers, and there's actually content coming out regularly there. And if you want to join the group,
as if there's not here.
Group. Yeah, I know, but I mean, that content can make you feel better about your personal life.
No, Anthony Giles, I think it's Giles. I don't play Apex. I've tried it, but you would think I do because it's like a PUBG, but with.
But you can learn while working out and listen to your
Halo type stuff. All right,
and recover by playing video games.
But you can learn. The point is, you can learn while gaming. All right. Another thing is, and people have already mentioned this. I'm going to throw one up here now, from Derek Beeler that says some of the best times of fellowship I've ever had was talking Jesus while playing Halo. Me too, while playing Halo, Derek. And let me tell you something. That plays into this point, which I think is this can be an issue of Christian fellowship. So you don't just have to do this just to try and do evangelism all the time. Chris Date and myself and Andy, when we play, there have been many times while I'm running across a virtual hell taking place on the screen in a battlefield, and yet we're talking about a literal hell with Chris Date. So this can be a great time to clarify theological concepts. Iron sharpens iron, and it can be a good time to just have fellowship with other brothers and sisters in Christ. Jonathan?
I agree with that. I think, again, tabletop gaming is like that, and even better because if you're doing it in person.
That's gaming. That's on topic.
But yeah, but especially I know that, I guess in your 40s, and of course Chris Date doesn't live here, so but Andy lives 3 minutes from your house, just like I do, but like me, I just never go over there. I mean, y'all aren't together doing it, even though you're doing it together. He could be sitting in there in your living room, insofar as your wife and daughter will put up with it. But yeah, I think you can fellowship that way. I mean, a lot of our communication is online. Though the one caveat I want to give to that, and the reason why I keep coming back to, and if I could find a role-playing group that was playing a good game, I might actually reconsider my life and try to schedule that in. No one does tabletop gaming, and I haven't done it in 10 years or whatever. But I mean, I'm not opposed to that kind of thing. But there's something about, you don't want to lose that, because we do so much digital communication now. Mm-hmm. That even in gaming circles, like you say, you have best theological conversation while playing a game. Well, that's with a headset on, though, probably, in most cases. And I think Christians need to get out of this lifestyle of, well, I found my people online, so I don't have people in my community.
Yeah, no, that's not good.
Yeah.
That's not a good
thing.
But that doesn't speak to anything wrong with this.
No, but you should make an effort insofar as you can to find people local in community, local believers.
Play couch co-op.
Yes.
Or play a Jackbox or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, and we used to, I guess it's the old VHS tapes that used to get us all afraid of having friends over to rent a movie, because you get this FBI warning. Public screenings, what counts as a public screen? You remember the green screen about copying and public screening stuff? Yeah. And it's like, but you don't know if how many people you can have to watch. But I mean, even if you're having a movie night or a board game night or whatever, I think we've become more disconnected, even with people that we attend church with or whatever. And we got to be careful with anything, including video games, that it doesn't impact our face-to-face time with other believers. And so we need to make that a part of these hobbies, insofar as we can and time allows and family will put up with. If you're in your 40s and still, see how I use the word still, playing video games, you should still try to make an effort to do it with other people. In
All
community.
right. Good comments. Anthony Giles says Twitch added a Christian tag for people to search for. So there are so many Christian Twitch streams available to watch and listen to. So so this is a relevant topic. I was excited when I posted this landing page that some of the first comments were, I do that, and this is an important topic, because I think for our audience, if you're not one of those people, and this is a good moment, if you are a boomer, or if you're a person of any age who does not game, and you think, I just don't get it, usually I like what you guys do on this channel, understand that you're helping a ministry by being here and by viewing the show, and if you support us by supporting us, that is targeting some of the issues that are going on with our demographic and young men, and I'm sure some young women, that this is a thing that they're dealing with.
And Mr. Green, I will stay pumped. He said stay pumped for him. And of course, I definitely intend to do that. And hopefully some of you gamers that have the physical appearance more like my co-host than me will also get into fitness. And you can...
Yeah, great. So honestly, Atheist says,
Hey,
you're suggesting
roll
gaming
back
is
the
a
tape.
good way to grow stronger
Yeah.
bonds internally, not evangelizing, right? Or no. We think both. It can serve both purposes.
Yeah.
But don't think of evangelism as what the Jehovah's Witnesses are trying to do to you or something. Think of it as this is a major part of our life, and if we're talking to someone and they want to talk with us about who we are, and we want to talk to them about who they are, which does happen occasionally. I'm talking about Jesus, and I want them to know about Jesus.
I'd imagine it happens quite a bit once you start seeing the same people popping up that you're playing with and playing against some of these games.
Yeah.
But I do want to say, roll back. You roll your eyes at this kind of stuff, but roll back the tape from previous videos. You did tell me to stay on you about this.
Okay, so let's see what else we have here. We have fellowship with other Christians, great analogies for worldview discussions. Someone mentioned this just a moment ago, and I didn't save it in the box of forever things. But someone mentioned this, and it's right. So obviously, when you're talking about the limits of our epistemology, often it will come up, well, maybe you're a brain in a vat, or you're in the matrix.
Yeah.
You can't demonstrate that anything around you that you think is happening is necessarily happening in a realistic sense, in the sense of realism. Like it could. I mean, you can say I am encountering these conscious. This is my experience that I'm having. I'm experiencing this qualia that seems to represent and track to real things outside of myself, but I can't know that I'm not in the Matrix. Okay, well, The Matrix is a great way of doing that. That's a movie. But video games are also give us great analogies and things like that we can use in worldview conversations, whether you're an atheist or not. And so, for example, I was on Chris Date's show not too long ago, and we were talking about his Calvinism. He is a determinist, but and Chris, if you see this, I hope that you'll think that I represent you fairly here. But when he's talking about determinism and how it works, he says that he thinks a great analogy for how that works would be like an author writing a story. And he thinks that has some benefits because the character in the story is determined by whatever the author wrote that they would do or say, but the character in the story doesn't feel that way. And from their perspective, they can do whatever they want. And so this is determinist compatibilism, but it's a way of conceiving of it that he thinks makes sense of Christian doctrinal perspectives and theology really well. My response was, I think it's more like something like The Sims. Only these Sims are not necessarily non-player characters. These are, imagine these as personal agents that are making real choices, but functionally from God's perspective, they're functioning like human beings on earth. And let me be careful to say that anytime you try to talk about the nature of Christ or the Trinity, you can fall into heresies of one kind or another when you use an analogy, almost without exception. So there are a couple of heresies I could fall into if you pressed me with this analogy, but the notion that I, outside of the game, can step into the mechanics of the game via something like a virtual reality headset and interact with the persons in the Sims world, that's not something they do on Sims right now, but it's easy enough to imagine it could be done. And so we talked about these analogies for how things might work. Video games provided a great analogy for that.
Yeah, I mean, and typically just whether it's movies, books, video games, whatever, science fiction and fantasy seem to be the biggest pools from which to draw these analogies from. Because in every worldview conversation, sometimes it gets complicated, but anyone who's interested in that kind of literature or film or video games, they have a frame of reference to a similar enough concept that you can borrow from to help explain what concept you're trying to get across. It's theological in nature or complicated or even apologetic in nature. So not saying that other genres can't do that, but it just seems whether it's Christian or non-Christian, and any kind of non-Christian you can throw in, including atheists, sci-fi, and for the longest time it was Star Trek and The Matrix for years were the two that most got pulled from. And before that it was fantasy, Lord of the Rings, and you go back to Tolkien and Lewis and all that with Chronicles of Narnia. Fantasy, but those genres, or even fairy tales with the Brothers Grimm, those kind of ways to communicate ideas.
Yeah, well, and even atheists, and I'll give you one from an atheist perspective. I think Tom Jump has done this before when he's made his Problem of Evil thing, which I think actually does get kind of fantastic. But he uses video games and difficulty levels and invincibility and all these kind of things to kind of give an analogy of what he thinks God could basically do if God wanted to. And so it happens all around with free will. One of the issues that comes up with discussions of free will is what's called the rollback problem. And the rollback problem is when you say, well, if you're saying you have libertarian freedom where you could literally choose to have done other than whatever you ended up doing, what you're saying is equivalent to if we rolled back your tape, kind of. Well, then you would you could end up doing other things, or you would end up doing other things some of those times. That's a matter of discussion, but someone who wanted to illustrate the rollback problem could think of games where when something bad happens, like you die or get seriously harmed, you actually have a button where you can roll it back to just before that happened and play it again. So there's all kinds of analogies.
Yeah, I don't know if, honestly, atheists came in late or not, but one of the points I made early on about the evangelism thing, that I don't know if he caught it or not, is that, no, we're not talking about bait and switch approach. Like whether it's come over or dial people in if you're doing it online or if you're doing a tabletop. It's not invite them to the game and then...
As a trap.
Yeah, and then gotcha.
I legitimately enjoy this community.
Right.
I'm there. My whole goal in life as a Christian is to spread the gospel ultimately, to obey God in that. And so the people that I encounter are going to be like that. Now, he says something here, and honestly, atheists, I want you to think about Jonathan Pritchett, who's the man who said it and who's sitting right here. And Jonathan, you sit there for a minute. Let me tell you what my analysis of this. He says, fair enough. I'm just thinking unwanted evangelizing, particularly at a tabletop game, is a good way to not get invited back to that game. Okay, so think about Jonathan Pritchett. Think about the lovable snark he is. And think about him attending a local comic book shop and engaging in a regular once-a-week tabletop game. Okay, imagine the kind of dudes that are there, and imagine his attitude. The first 2 weeks, they will think, I think this guy might be a jerk. Although maybe not, because remember, we're talking about a tabletop game at a comic book store. There's going to be a lot of snark to be had.
Right.
And I think that Jonathan Pritchett saying, all right, atheist, on the other side of the table, and being kind of straightforward in his lovable, snarky way, might actually go over well in an environment like that. The point is, I think it's all about what people think your motivations are, and you being genuine and legitimately not trying to trap someone.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I mean, Jesus is Lord of my hobbies. Okay, He's Lord of all of our hobbies. Okay, so leaving Jesus out of hobbies is not possible for Christians. Okay. But at the same time, they are hobbies. So you're primarily, this is evangelism as you're doing other stuff, right? My primary purpose for if I was to show up at a gym or show up at a tabletop game or show up to play PUBG at Braxton's house, if he were ever, to let me into his house, which he does not.
I invited you over just the other day.
I know, I never go. But, I mean, you're there to do that, right? You're there to do that. You're there to play games. Christians like to play games. Christians like to do all kinds of stuff.
Not J.J. Phillips. J.J. Phillips says, Come on over for some Fortnite. Comes over. Great. I'm glad you made it. Now, before we play, do you know if you will go to heaven when you die? Okay, think on it. Let's play.
Yeah, that's totally not what.
No, but Devira raises an interesting question. She says, or a point, but y'all know that really is a tactic with many Christians. At least it was when I was in college.
Right, and I don't actually.
I'm not against the tactic, frankly. I'm not against the tactic of saying, here's a fun thing we're organizing. And because it's the local Baptist student ministry, you can bet that they're going to share the gospel.
Fair enough.
Or a group of friends saying, hey, I've got a bunch of friends and we're going to play tonight. I thought you might want to come over. Now, we usually talk theology and stuff, if that's okay with you, or,
right.
Something like that.
But there's two different categories we're talking about here. One is you're intentionally doing it for evangelism, okay? And if you are intentionally doing it for evangelism, then I think that you need to be up front so it's not a bait and switch. But if you're going about your life doing your hobbies, and Jesus is Lord of your hobbies and Lord of your life, and you bring it up as you're going about doing your hobbies, that's not a bait and switch. That's you being you. That's you being Christian. And so I want to make sure we make those two things distinct, because Vera is right, though. If it is a tactic, the Baptist student ministry or the local Presbyterian church, we're having a game night where we will be doing gaming, but there are also going to be testimonies or a little devotional or something like that. Be honest about it. Of course, if you're walking through the threshold of a church door, you should get the message. But if you're doing it at your house even, and it's intentionally for that, then yes, I think that you need to be honest, because I actually am not a fan of the bait and switch tactic.
But we're imagining a very unlikely scenario, at least right now in gaming history, because that does happen. A bunch of people go into somebody's house, but increasingly more games are made, unless they're party games. Increasingly games that gamers play are only playable by multiplayer, or that's the most natural way to play. And the consoles want you to do that because they want everyone to have their own profile and their own payment and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, they want to keep you apart. Unlike tabletop gaming, video game companies want to keep you in your mama's basement.
But what you could do is you could start a gaming, a group of friends that do online gaming, and then you can invite someone to play with you. And it's a Christian gaming group. You can even just say it's called the Christian Gamers Alliance or whatever. If CGA, I don't know if you exist. I'm just saying Christian Gamers Alliance.
If not, it will by the end of this.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Computer Theist.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. But now you understand, Computer Theist. You say that on one of the most least watched episodes we've ever done. So it could be your intuitions that are a bit off. But thank you nonetheless. Okay. So there's one more thing that I think. So we've covered evangelism, learning while gaming, fellowship with other Christians, great analogies for worldview discussions, and lastly, engaging your imaginative side. I can hear all of the conservative Republicans thinking I'm saying something really, really like loosey-goosey, touchy-feely. But sorry, you have an imaginative side. You're made in the image of God.
Conservative Republicans, maybe, not conservative people.
I said conservative Republicans.
Okay. Because conservative people understand the importance of imagination and imaginative literature.
But they're mostly, I'd say much of our Christian audience is probably near that camp. And so here's what I want to say about this is that you are right there in Genesis 1, we're made in the image of God. Well, what does that mean? Well, in a past, there's several things I've said before on this show many, many times. I think it's ways that you are like God, as we can tell from Scripture or whatever. Ways that you're like God and you're not like the animals, and the animals aren't like God. Things you and God have in common that the animals don't have in common with you or God. And some of those things are like free will, a conviction of sin, morality in general, a spirit, all these kind of things are things. And creativity, in a passage replete with creativity, the creation of the cosmos, I think we should understand that God put imagination and creativity into us. And video games do spark that as you step into a different world and imagine functioning in that world and what you could build in that world and things like that.
Yeah, and of course, expanding your capacities for imagination expands your vocabulary, expands your connection points with other people. It expands the way that you can engage with more types of people. It gives you more creativity in every aspect of your life. And so that's why it's important, I think, to read imaginative literature, to watch imaginative film. I think tabletop gaming, that kind of RPG, actually is superior than video games because they're handing you, it's conditioned upon what they've pre-programmed. Whereas in tabletop, you can buy adventures that are already made that you can follow, but
or you can craft your own adventure.
Or you can craft your own, and even because you don't know what people are going to do on the fly, you're going to have to adjust as you go, even if you're doing a pre-made module is what they call it. Mm-hmm. So even if you're going through a pre-made module, you never know what the other if you're the GM was what the game, or the DM, Dungeon Master for Dungeons and Dragons people. So you never know what they're going to do. So you have to come up with something on the fly. But I think that imagination, expanding your capacity for imagination. This is why reading, I think, is still superior in that form, because you have to fill in so much yourself to film even. Mm-hmm. It gives you a broader palette to engage the world with.
And I'll tell you another thing.
And this is God's world, and so you need that broad
And I'll tell you another thing about it is when you think about pieces of art, we're thinking about the greatest examples of creativity that mankind has produced. And we think about great statues like we see in Rome, or we think about perhaps the Eiffel Tower or the Statue of Liberty or something like that, or we think about some beautiful painting or some building that some architect put together. Video games are in that world of art. That we usually roll our eyes at a notion like that because of what is often associated with video games and the people that are often associated with playing video games, being stereotyped as people with
who
less
are bald,
maturity.
Bearded seminary presidents.
Right, that's the stereotype, I think. But as people who are less mature. But this is a form of art, from the music to the created world. And you play a game like Zelda Breath of the Wild, which the Nintendo Switch doesn't have near the I don't think the graphics capacities of like an Xbox Series X or something, or the new PlayStation. But when you even play a game like that, or you play like Red Dead Redemption was praised for this, that the environment seems so real and so massive, and you can go anywhere and you can do anything, and it's all.
It's
but then
expansive,
you look up.
yeah.
But then you look up from that beautiful work of art, because that is what it is.
Yeah.
And you go outside and you look at the real grass and the real trees and the real people.
Look at the trees.
And look at the trees, yeah. And you realize how the best that mankind can produce still pales,
right,
in comparison.
Yeah, and of course we don't appreciate reality as much as we should. The outside world. But what's interesting that you brought up about that is the artistry is. So I like film scores. I don't know how many people still like film scores, right? Some of the great ones, like one of the greatest film scores of all time, I think, was The Last of the Mohicans score. Is one of just incredible score. But these video games are having, I think, better scores. And
the guy came to the Evansville Symphony who did the score for I forget the name of this minimalistic game where you're traveling across the journey, maybe something like that. You're traveling across a wasteland. And he was here and he did the music. It won an Oscar. Oscar. What's the
Grammy?
A Grammy, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some of these video game scores are they're honestly better than a lot of the film scores that you get these days. It's not, John Williams score or something. I mean, it's just it's amazing what they're getting. And of course, a lot of these. They're more creative too, I think, in the video game scores too, because they're going to mix the traditional orchestra elements more with some of the more electronic instruments. And very, very few film scores blend those as well as the video game scores do. I mean, film scores do blend all that, the electronic instruments.
But it's a trick. It's a trick because they are crafting. With the video game, anything can happen. And so there are things built into the game that when you cross a certain threshold, the music intensifies. Or when you back away, it goes back softer again. And that is in itself a feat, you know.
Yeah, well, that's what AI stuff, I think, following along and tracking moves. Whereas if you're just making a film score, you're hitting your beats,
At the
composing
point where
as
it's
you
predetermined for the movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, Atheist says, I've had discussions with Christians bookended by swapping stories about our D&D campaigns and even using analogies to D&D during our discussion.
There you go.
I'll tell you this much. I was raised
Tabletop.
to think that D&D was
someone-
a tool of the devil.
Right. Someone mentioned that
And
earlier.
it's basically you've got the Ouija board, and then right after the Ouija board is D&D. And so I wasn't allowed to play Dungeons and Dragons. I don't share those concerns as far as I understand them right now, but there's still that wiring in me that's like, I got to convince these people not to play this satanic game.
Yeah, I mean, but,
I'm kidding.
But here's the thing about, Dungeons and Dragons. What's the difference between that and Lord of the Rings and Middle Earth?
I don't know. I never got to play Dungeons and Dragons.
Right. I'm just saying there's.
But it's just high fantasy. Stuff,
right. It's just wizards and dragons and dungeon crawling and all of that stuff. So I never understood that. First of all, here's where Christians went wrong on Dungeons and Dragons.
They made it hugely popular by protesting it,
by poo-pooing
just
it.
like the Last Temptation of Christ.
But that's not where they went. Number one, it's very, when you're talking about expanding your capacities for imagination, that does it in spades. And two, it is actually closer to a Christian worldview than a lot of the games that we see now that assume metaphysical or at least naturalism or whatever. And so the fact that it has these supernatural elements makes
You're saying I'm less Christian, like not less a Christian or less a good Christian, but less Christian when I'm playing PUBG than when I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Right. It's closer to a biblical worldview. Yeah. Look, it's like the horror genre of films. People are like, Christians are like, oh, horror is so awful. No, if it wasn't for Jewish apocalypse combined with or remixed with medieval Christian Gothic architecture, horror wouldn't exist. So it's a Judeo-Christian, influences that created the horror genre in the first place. If you take those two elements, that's basically the bare bones horror is medieval Christian Gothic trappings and Jewish apocalypses are pretty horror. Sure, you can find pagan backgrounds too, but what was in the dominant culture for 2,000 years? I'm just saying, horror should be owned by Christians. But no, what you find is, and sure, some people do it with over-the-top gore that might be too much for people that haven't...
Yeah.
Because the Bible is not a film, and when they made a film about Samson, and it was like, that's not really... If you really filmed this, it would have been like the 300 movie, as far as blood and guts and stuff. So give me a break with that. So
They need to make a 300 movie about Samson.
But, like a legit one, not a pure.
But we've got some interesting stuff happening in the chat here all of a sudden. So first off, would Jesus play video games if he were alive? That's the better topic. Why
didn't you think of that topic, Braxton?
Would Jesus watch? Someone else put it on here. Where did it go? Would Jesus? Maybe not, but would Jesus watch YouTube? Maybe. Would Jesus ride in a car? If so, what kind of car? Would Jesus?
Would Jesus eat McDonald's?
Use a cell phone? Would he have a smartphone? Do you have a smartphone? Would Jesus have a smartphone? We could do this with a lot of things. Yeah. Did Jesus have times of relaxation? Did Jesus?
Yeah, he had times where he wanted to get away from.
Where everybody. He got away and spent time with the Father. Of course, that's not playing video games, but you can spend time relaxing. You can spend time getting away. You have to recharge your batteries. Some people have never been in full-time ministry, and let me tell you something. Ministry can take it out of you in a way that many other jobs can't. Some can, but maybe the work of a psychologist or somebody dealing with those kind of things. But you take home the experiences, the conversations, the feelings, the relationships, the concern about the person. All those things are going on in your head all the time, and it can absolutely result in what is called burnout. And many ministers go through burnout. You've got to have times to recharge your batteries.
I think that happens in every profession, to be honest with you.
But
would Jesus play video games? Definitely, maybe.
What about murdering? When you kill someone in a game, is it the case you're committing murder in your heart? So let's talk about what Jesus means when he's talking about committing murder in your heart, or looking after a woman to lust after her and committing adultery in your heart. One thing that is important to note here is, number one, Jesus is trying to up the ante of what the expectation is, so that it's not just a legalism that says, I don't murder anyone and I don't sleep around, to, yeah, but you're still a sinner because you have feelings of murder towards someone and you have feelings of lust towards someone, however you want to cash that out. And so he's saying that you've already committed adultery in your heart, or you've committed murder in your heart. Here's the thing about that. There is a difference still. Point number one was, this is really important and you're still in sin. And so we don't want to downplay the fact that someone is in sin when they're murdering in their heart or committing adultery in their heart. The content of what that is, we'll talk about in just a moment. But we at the same time want to say that murdering someone in your heart is not the same thing as murdering someone in your physical body, nor is committing adultery with someone in your heart the same thing as committing adultery with someone in your heart and in your body. Mm-hmm. There are still relevant differences, namely you didn't still commit those things in your body. So what is it talking about? Well, in the case of murder, which is specifically what we're talking about here, we're talking about hating someone. And when I'm playing multiplayer and someone dies, I actually sometimes feel bad because I know what it's like for your game to be over. But I'm not hating that person in any sense. And so that's important. And same with adultery. When you lust, you are committing adultery in your heart. And that is a big deal to Jesus, so it should be a big deal to you. But that doesn't mean you might as well go ahead and go sleep with someone, because you haven't committed adultery in your body. And those are still distinct things, even though Jesus wants to make a powerful point.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, when you're talking about killing someone in a game, whether it's a tabletop or in a video game, there's no malice there, like real sinister malice. Like even if like my job in a video game was to kill Braxton's character, that's not killing Braxton or having malice against,
or really harming me in any way.
Right. It's fun. Like, I would have fun running around probably if I learned how to play the game, trying to shoot you in some sort of video game world. That just sounds like I'd enjoy beating you at that game. So, no, I don't know.
He has to fantasize about it.
Someone said Jesus would not play video games. He would play board games or whatever. Well, one of the things that Jesus did in the ancient Mediterranean world, Jesus entered people's houses and did as they did. So if he entered in Braxton Hunter's house and Braxton was sitting around playing PUBG, and Braxton offered it, I don't see Jesus being opposed to it, right? Any more than he would be opposed to sit down with your family at dinner if you had him as a guest, right? And part of it was, if we're talking about the ancient Mediterranean world, part of it is the whole hospitality thing and the honor culture and all of that. Mm-hmm. It would almost be a slight if
you didn't engage in a game someone invited you to play.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you just do what they're doing. Paul was. Insofar as it's not sin, Paul was willing to. Okay, I'm going to do Jewish stuff to win Jews. I'm going to do Greek stuff to win Greeks. And insofar as it didn't cause him to stumble or commit sin, he was going to do as the Greeks did. And he was going to do as the Jews did, so that he might be all things to all people, so that he could win some. So yeah, I don't see why Jesus would.
One of the problems is we don't have all the information even about
be any
Jesus
different than Paul, who imitated Jesus. So
one of the problems is we don't have all the information about Jesus that we would like to have, even about Jesus. Even though we have 4 Gospels about him and other New Testament books that talk about things that continue the ministry of Jesus, we still don't have as much about him as we'd like, and most of what we have contained has to do with his amazing birth and ministry and death. That's what it has to do with, and it doesn't give us some of the anecdotal things that we might find super interesting, unfortunately. So,
if he would hang out with prostitutes and tax collectors, he would hang out with gamers, because you can kind of put those all in the same bucket. Just kidding.
Oh man,
I'm kidding.
Okay. Whoops.
Dead air. Weren't you getting on the? I do want to point out.
Was the Trinity added after? How do I respond to Jehovah's Witness friend that doesn't think the Trinity is necessary to be saved? In other words, what's the best evidence for it? Well, I mean, I think that passages like the baptism of Jesus, where we see three distinct characters,
John
that could all
1:1,
be rightly understood as divine.
Grandma Sharp rule applied all the It's just it's too.
Do you see God the Father being spoken of as God? Do you see Jesus being treated as God and being spoken of as God? Do you see the Holy Spirit being spoken of as a person and as God? Yes. Sometimes Jesus and the Spirit, so like Paul does this in Romans, I forget which chapter, but right in the middle somewhere. But but he talks about, he's almost interchangeably speaks of Jesus and the Spirit, right? So there's you can't think of it?
I don't know what you're talking
I'll find
about.
you what I'm talking about. But anyway, anytime you have these three different persons being spoken of as God, well, then the Trinity follows naturally from that.
Yeah, I mean, is the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit all persons? Yes. Are they all distinct? Yes. Are they all God? Yes. So you have one being in three persons, and if you, it's incredible that no matter how much evidence you show to oneness and Jehovah's Witnesses and any sort of anti-Trinitarian theology, that they just refuse to go with the evidence because of their beliefs. And one of the things, this evidence doesn't get talked about enough. But, we always talk about, well, and this is a criticism that atheists often bring up towards Christians. You all have so many different variegated belief systems, right? That's one of the knocks. Well, one thing that historic Christianity has always agreed on, this is why I know people, it's popular to poo-poo it, but why mere Christianity, why a paleo-orthodoxy, the fact that across all traditions, Orthodox traditions, the Trinity has been affirmed since the earliest church fathers. The Spirit has guided us into at least the necessary things that we all agree on. Because when you have people with wildly divergent, almost worldviews on a lot of things, a determinist and a libertarian free will person do not have the same worldview in a very important ways. But yet they both agree on these fundamental aspects that go back 2,000 years. Yeah. So where there is consensus across all traditions, you can pretty much bet that the Spirit has led the truth, to God's people on those things. So
Romans 5, first half is what I'm referring to. Okay. All right, so let's keep trucking. So thank you for that super chat. We so appreciate that. And let's see.
Yeah, the watch there. My John 1:1 says, "Oh God, yeah." Okay, yeah. Slam RN's on top of that.
Slam RN's here.
Yeah.
Welcome, Slam RN. Any other questions,
I'll
comments,
six her
statements?
off. I'd love to be the to see the Jehovah's Witness knock on her door. I bet you they'd get an earful. Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, if we ended now, this would be the shortest one we've done in a while. This has been about an hour.
Really?
So should we cut it off here?
Should we? Well, yeah, wrap it up.
All right, I'll tell you what. I'm going to give you all just a few seconds to think of possible questions. If I don't get questions, we're going to cut it off. And in that time, I'm going to tell you that the next we're not going to be here next week for the next week's live stream. I'm going to be on my 20th anniversary trip with my wife. We're going down the West Coast, and so that's going to be cool. And from Portland, Oregon to San Francisco.
Yeah, starting in a horrible city and stopping in a horrible city. It's just... as you all are keenly aware, I am not a fan of the West Coast. I've been to California 2 times in my life, both for the residency of Biola, and wasn't impressed.
So we'll be going there, and
I feel sorry for Nick Quint, who lives in California.
That means that next week we won't have a show, and the next week after that we will have a show, hopefully. And I'm thinking the topic of that one is going to be the Kalam versus the contingency.
Which one's better?
Which one is better? And which one should you be using?
Anthony Giles says 2 more hours. Are you kidding me? This is like our lunch break. We take longer lunch breaks on Fridays, but we actually do seminaries.
Harry Stark
Or at least I
says,
do.
what are the similarities and differences in regards to gladiatorial arenas in the Roman Empire? Well, I can't speak to that as I'm not an expert in ancient architecture, but I can tell you some things that I do know because I had to memorize it for a script. And that is that if you go to Turkey, modern day Turkey today, and you travel to the modern city of Aspendos, you will find the most perfect Roman theater that is intact to this day. It is not gladiatorial, but it was used for performances and things like that. And it's very close to the resort town of, that place. And so you can go check it out.
Yeah, go documentary.
Get the documentary at braxtonhunter.com and click on the documentary tab.
Beeler has another question.
Beeler is keeping us going.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, he might not be the only one. Is Frogger okay? That's the only video game I've owned because it came.
Frogger is awesome video game. What a game. That was
Sorry.
fantastic. Yes.
The soteriology debates are extremely contentious.
Yes,
How can
they
we
are.
make it all less divisive?
Stop caring. Look, stop being married to your soteriology position. It's not that big of a deal. But you know who?
I'm married
sorry.
to my soteriology position.
No, well, I mean, as far as to the point where it's going to affect your relationships and ability
No,
to
that's
be
not. You don't divide
right,
fellowship over that.
right. And so, and I'm sorry to say this to our Calvinist listeners, but you guys started way more. And I'm not saying there aren't contentious non-Calvinists, but Calvinists, they normally bring the heat to those conversations first.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I used to be, and I'm not just saying, oh, I had that one debate once where they did it. No, you and I have been talking to Calvinists, and back when we really were into that, all those discussions for over a decade, and every time it was always the Calvinists who got heated first.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, not that non-Calvinists don't get heated too, but I'm just saying, here's where non-Calvinists get heated. When they start impugning motives, you reject the sovereignty of God. You're man-centered. All of you're trying to understand the text as honestly as you can, and then they start throwing out these accusations. It's called false witness. You're lying because and of course, if you believe the Book of Revelation, liars go to the no, I'm just kidding, Calvinist. But you are lying about people when you say you don't care about the sovereignty of God. So when they start all that business, it usually gets really heated.
Okay, you're right.
But Calvinists, you need to settle down. And I guarantee you,
And to the extent the Cage Stage
Yeah.
non-Calvinists, they did the same thing.
Right, no, but I'll tell you this. If Calvinists, as a whole, collectively, dialed it back some and they're getting heated about it, I guarantee you that the ones who are not Calvinists that are Cage Stage or whatever, they would go away. They would go away. So, or they would get shamed by everybody. But the thing that irritates me is the Calvinist flamethrowers who the second you throw a flame back at them, they whine and say you're not being charitable after they just, said a whole bunch of horrible things about you that have nothing to do with the debate. So, yeah, I'm picking on Calvinists here. Don't feel sorry about it because you guys can be jerks.
Okay. Punchbowl Haircut says, some say killing in video games is okay because it's not real. What would you say to people who would say viewing animated pornography is okay because it's not real people? All right. So here, this is the question that often follows the previous one. I remember when I was pastoring and I made a similar point to this, it was brought up. So the violence that takes place in video games, the violence takes place in video games or in films and stuff, is typically does not provoke people to go and do likewise. Where it does, that person should definitely not be engaging in anything related to violence like that. But nudity, even simulated nudity like that, often does. A large number of people, it often does provoke and perhaps is designed to platform that kind of lust. And if that's the case, then that's not good. So the thing with the pornographic stuff is it does seem to
You're welcome,
cause
Barry.
people to what?
Oh, I was just talking.
Okay.
But I think that is a fantastic
Okay.
answer. I agree 100% with what you just said. most people who play video games don't then go. I mean, they tried to make that case, I remember, in front of Congress in the 90s or whatever. But yeah, most people don't. Braxton playing PUBG doesn't cause Braxton to go run around and shoot Chris Tate in real life or whatever. But Braxton watching animated, simulated porn.
Don't even
stuff
say that sentence.
Someone's
going to clip that out.
Yeah.
I don't do that.
Right, I know. You don't watch those games. But I'm saying...
Don't use me as an example for this. Use you.
Okay. So I could not go... I could run around and shoot Braxton Hunter. I could not... but if I watch this kind of stuff in video games, it's not a large step to go to porn, and it's not a large step to go from porn to sexual sin. So that's the difference. More people engage in sexual sin than they do gun violence, even now. By lots. Not saying that we don't have a violence problem in the United States or elsewhere in the world, but I guarantee you more people are involved in sexual sin than they are in violence, exponentially. And so just taking what Braxton said, the difference there is quite stark.
It just turns out that we have a really strong filter for murdering people.
Yeah.
We don't tend to, non-believing people don't tend to just kill because they saw it in a movie or played it. Yeah. Now, there are people, and those people are criminals, and to the extent that someone has a desire to hurt an animal or a desire to hurt another person, maybe we make sure that they don't play video games.
Right, but Christians and non-Christians alike fall into sexual sin a lot more than they fall into violence in the real world.
Yeah.
So I think that's always a good place to draw the line.
All right, let's get out of here, Pritchett. This has been fun. We've had a blast with you. We love this time of the week. And next week, or 2 weeks from today, we're going to talk about the Kalam versus contingency.
Oh, you know what we didn't do?
What?
We didn't give for people who are interested in further reading, I didn't list these. I found these on Amazon. I haven't read any of them. I think one of them is assigned in one of your classes, but some people are taking to writing on theology and video games, and I have no idea. Some of these authors may not be orthodox or what. I have no idea who these people are, but I think that if you're interested in the subject, regardless of who these authors are, these are the people that are writing about it. And so maybe we need more people writing about it if these books turn out to be not so great. But No Avatars Allowed, Theological Reflections on Video Games by Joshua Wise. Of Games and God, A Christian Exploration of Video Games by Kevin Schutt. Gaming and the Divine, A New Systematic Theology of Video Games by Frank Bossman. And Playing as Others, Theological and Ethical Responsibility in Video Games by Benjamin Chicka. So those books, and actually they're all, well, 2 of them are very pricey. 2 of them are less than $25. But there are people out there thinking about theology in video games, and we probably, if some people are thinking about it, need a lot more people thinking about it.
Right. Yeah. So Punch Bowl Haircut, this is the last question. Well, I see one down there, so we'll get back to it. Maybe. All right. So is animated porn not itself a sin, or is anything that makes you more likely to sin a sin? So when you're talking about the drawing of a female form, okay, there is some value, there is some good in that. There is some creative expression, there's your imagination, those things are valuable. But the intention of someone creating animated porn is to cause someone else to lust, and worse, to profit from that lust that another person is engaging in. The person viewing it is likely viewing it so that they can lust and give that other person what they want and lust and possibly pay money to lust like that. And so there's nothing involved in this situation that is holy and good except for the wrongly used expression of our creative potential and imagination. And one thing to think about then is, well, is it then always wrong to draw the female form nude? Well, that would be actually, or the male form nude. That would actually be an interesting question for another show, right? What is the value in that? But whether you think there's ever a time for that or not, you can definitely see the difference between a beautiful statue in Rome like that and animated pornography, right? There's a big difference, and the difference has to do with the intent and what is being platformed here. And so I think that's important. And why it's important is because, and this is important for moral discussions, we're not saying that there's an absolute here with some of these moral things. It's not that it's absolutely wrong to kill a human being. It's wrong that it's absolutely wrong to unjustly kill another human being.
Right.
It's not that it's wrong to depict a naked woman necessarily. Again, that might be a good discussion. But it's wrong to create an artwork of a naked woman for the purpose of lust, to make lust possible for others or yourself. So, Pritchett, anything to say to that?
Nope.
You agree with all that?
Well, say what's up back to MJ.
What's up, MJ?
Y'all go subscribe to MJ Jackson's channel.
All right. I've enjoyed this, and we'll see you. Let's see. Well, I didn't even start the music. There's the music, Pritchett. MJ, I've got to get back to you on a personal matter. Please forgive me. And we'll see you next time. Jonathan, where will we see him?
In 2 weeks on Trinity Radio.
Thank you for the super chats, everyone. Thank you, Numa. Appreciate that. Thank you, MJ. And everyone else who gave, thank you. And the rest, thanks for just being here.